The technology always moves much faster than the legislation, but even more importantly, it's the philosophy and the culture behind it. So we can make a drone today, and many people have, that can accurately deliver and land in your backyard. It's really the bigger cultural and social acceptance of doing that.
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello everyone, this is Randy Goers and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 159. When can we expect to see drone deliveries? Well, if we ask today's guest, he would say it's already happening. Joel Ifill is CEO of Dash Systems, a California-based company that designs, manufactures, and deploys low-cost one-way delivery drones built from the ground up to operate in today's air logistics network. The drones can be mounted to any commercial aircraft, helicopter, or UAV, allowing fast and rapid deployment into any environment. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Joel talks about creating a precision drone delivery service, how it supported recovery operations in Puerto Rico following Hurricane Maria, and he offers insights into the future of drone delivery. But before we hear from Joel, I want to thank those of you who have been supporting my funding campaign on Patreon. For as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to patreon.com/drone radio show to join the team. Now let's learn about a revolutionary drone delivery service with Joel Ifill. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Joel to introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Joel Ifill. I am the CEO and founder of Dash Systems. I'm an engineer by training, entrepreneur, and also I occasionally throw packages out of airplanes.
Joel, tell us about Dash Systems.
Dash Systems was founded in 2016, and our mission was to increase the applicability, availability, and feasibility of civilian airdrops. So more specifically, we commercialize the ability to throw packages out of airplanes.
Where did the idea come from?
I'm an engineer by training, and my first job out of school, a decade ago, was working on precision-guided munitions, so smart bombs. So name smart rocket program, Stinger, Hawk, ATACMS, multiple launch rocket system. I was involved in their manufacturing. And I saw this tremendous ability to kill, but I also said, why can't we use that same technology to deliver packages? And that was really the nexus of the company.
What type of packages or deliveries do you offer?
Our flagship product right now is a guided delivery vehicle. So essentially, it can carry up to 20 kilograms and it acts as a UAV glider. So you launch it from an airplane and it will do a precision homing event and basically return to home. So the question of what do we package is really a matter of what do people ship, what do people need in an immediate sense.
And for those of us who are not metrically inclined, 20 kilograms is about how many pounds?
20 kilograms is 44 pounds.
That's a pretty sizable payload. What sort of deliveries have you done so far?
Right now, we're solely focused on the humanitarian and disaster relief community because the first thing that goes in any major event or storm, of course, is the infrastructure, primarily being roads. But of course, you can always still fly an airplane overhead. So we're really just bridging that gap and giving airplanes helicopter-like performance and the ability to land anywhere.
Do the drones actually land where they're unloaded? Or do they fly overhead and drop the payload to the ground? So
the actual system is a one-way UAV glider. So it is only going one way, and that is down. It lands, and then the body and the nose are very low cost and recyclable. The tail kit with all the guidance, we recover.
How do you recover the drone?
So we usually do a core exchange model. A lot of the work we're doing is with search and rescue humanitarian organizations. So we set up an area that is cut off. We land all the supplies, and then a month later or so, when everything's cleared up, we just take possession of those back again.
With this type of service, what challenges needed to be solved to make things work smoothly?
Stepping back high level, bigger than any of the technology, because I think within the drone space, engineers and technologists were pretty good. There's not too many technical challenges that can't be solved, a little bit more time and money. So really looking beyond the technology, what I spent the first about year or so doing was getting the paperwork, the precedents, and the organizational side solved so that I could do this legally and safely within the U.S. and FAA structure. So I think that was probably the biggest hurdle, is getting a safe operation off the ground. And the second one is just the technology side of what does it take to make a one-way glider.
Are you flying beyond visual line of sight? Is that one of the things you had to work out?
Without giving away too many company secrets, we worked heavily with the FAA, and we are completely exempt from Part 107. So we do not operate under Part 107, so all of those requirements beyond visual line of sight do not apply to us.
How accurate are you in getting the drone to its landing area?
We're just a little bit less accurate than whatever our GPS basis is, so that's usually about 3 meters, so usually within 10 meters. The biggest thing that we always struggle with is wind. That's really the biggest source of error. But repeatably, we can land within 10 meters.
Have you had any instances of someone trying to either steal the payload or knock the drone out of the sky?
That's actually an interesting question. No, we have never had that happen before. And honestly, our flight times are measured in seconds. So you'd have to be pretty quick on the ball to try to intercept a 15-second flight.
How far does it typically fly from a plane to where it needs to go?
Generally, only a few 100 meters laterally. It's from a guidance standpoint, it's a lot easier to come straight down. So that's actually the flight profile we take. The best way to think of it is it's a shuttlecock or a birdie from Batman.
Can you give us a recent example of where it was used?
Yeah, we did our first pilot in beta in Puerto Rico in October of 2017. And so in that case there, it was right after Hurricane Maria. From San Juan to get inland was basically still impossible. So we rented a Cessna 208 and went out and did airdrops inland along the spine of Puerto Rico, specific to two areas, Las Marias and Utuado.
How many airdrops did you perform?
We ended up delivering a total of about 2,500 pounds on 2 flights.
Wow, that's quite a bit. What did you find that worked really well?
The overall flight stack works very well, which is showing up, selecting a landing zone, and going out and doing a precision landing to it. So I think overall it's been mission success so far in terms of doing as advertised, which is doing a precision landing in a given area. Were there any challenges that you still have to overcome? Yes, one big challenge, especially within the disaster community, is deconfliction with other airplanes. So, of course, there's always a lot of talk about UTM and unmanned traffic management and even traditional air traffic control. In a disaster zone, the first thing that went was power and radio and communications, and thus even traditional ATC was often closed down or unavailable. So that was probably the most difficult part, was just coordinating with the Coast Guard and other individuals flying in the area to make sure we weren't going to endanger any operations. So do you primarily deliver in conjunction with recovery efforts, or do you perform routine delivery missions? We're working towards routine and scheduled deliveries. Right now, we act as an on-demand emergency logistics provider. So it's generally on-call and scheduled for emergencies. It's those first few days or few weeks where you have no other option but a helicopter. And of course, helicopters are just too expensive. In Puerto Rico, what was primarily delivered? There's probably been food, water filtration, medical supplies, electronics, batteries, radios, things of that nature. It's kind of those basic staples you need in a disaster. As I understand it, in addition to using drones, your team also throws payloads out of the plane by hand. Yeah, I think before you run, you walk. So beyond just those hyper-accurate UAV gliders, we also model anything you can throw out of an airplane, right down to a bag of sand or a bag of rice. So a lot of times for our clients, they don't need a high accuracy landing. So we'll use a parachute system, or we'll quite literally just throw things out the side of the airplane. Earlier, you were talking about the inspiration for starting the company. What are you hoping to achieve as a result of your efforts? So I think on the large level, short term, our goal is really to expand the applicability of this technology, because so many times in disasters, we have the resources in terms of idled airplanes that really could be serving the similar mission to a helicopter. So it's really just bridging that gap in terms of emergency infrastructure and emergency logistics. So there should never be an excuse where we say we can't reach someone, we can't reach an area due to weather or due to a lack of roads. So that's the short term. But the long-term goal is really this vision of enabling same-day delivery anywhere in the world. And when I say anywhere in the world, I mean anywhere in the world, because even the most remote villages, say Resolute, Canada, which is the northernmost city in the world, there is still a daily flight from Montreal to Quebec that flies right over their heads. So it's really bridging those gaps in those areas that don't have airports, don't have a traditional logistics channel, and providing one. So would the services be mostly used in rural and remote areas rather than in suburban and urban areas? Correct. And I think it's us privileged in big urban modern cities. We have this expectation of Amazon Prime, where it's just assumed you can get things same day or next day, which very conversely, if you go inland to Nebraska, North Dakota, same day, next day delivery really doesn't exist. And it's kind of just a given of, well, of course they don't get it. They're not a major city with a major airport. I really want to change that formula, saying you don't have to have a 5 or 10 million person city to have same day or next day deliveries.
What have you learned about drone delivery that you didn't know before you started the service?
A lot of the calculus around drone delivery and air delivery is a little off. I think right now when we talk about it, we think about this idea, of a 7-Eleven delivery, a pizza delivery as kind of the marquee of, getting things instantly, getting things in 20 or 30 minutes. And we really look at the whole history of shipping things by air and also the economic behind that. That model really doesn't match up. You already have existing choices and a price threshold you're not willing to cross to get a pizza in 30 minutes. It's really all those other areas like small islands that don't have an infrastructure, don't have a basis for any delivery that could benefit most from the technology. All that being said, I think the thing I learned the most is that the technology always moves much faster than the legislation, but even more importantly, it's the philosophy and the culture behind it. So we can make a drone today, and many people have, that can accurately deliver and land in your backyard. It's really the bigger cultural and social acceptance of doing that.
Do you foresee larger drones and larger payloads in the future? Or is this a good spot where you're at now?
No, we're going all the way up to about 4,000 pounds. We're going up to pallet size. That's where we see the market, and that's actually where we see the economic need. When you go to putting things on airplanes, you're not moving 5 pounds at a time, which is why our entry models are all usually around 44 pounds or so. So we always see on the bigger side of the market versus that kind of 5 or 3 pound delivery, delivering that pizza.
Will those larger drones follow the same model and need to be recovered after the drop?
It's still a very similar philosophy, and at that point, it's really at some point, it's launching an airplane from an airplane, and it's landing a glider on a much smaller runway strip, much as you would do if you did a towed gliding operation today.
What sort of feedback are you getting?
The feedback has been very good to date. The signs, the opportunities are there because in so many cases around the world and so many aviation organizations we talked to, they said, we always wanted to do something like airdrops, but we didn't know how. We didn't have the technological basis and the safe operational standards to do this. So really, we found what we have been adding right now is a professional service where one didn't exist, which was the expertise and technology to enable airdrops from a commercial airplane, within the context of a FAA charter. So that has been the biggest thing the market is missing to date, was the ability to do airdrops, not so much the technology itself.
Is there a ready-made economic model for the service? Or is the expectation such that since these are considered humanitarian efforts, they should be provided on a pro bono basis?
Conversely, a lot of people think that humanitarian workers or the humanitarian space doesn't pay. Sadly, in many cases, you pay more in that space because you're not trying to get to major cities. You're trying to get to the middle of nowhere. So you're already paying, kind of the retail rate for air cargo and bush pilots to try to land on a ruddy field somewhere. So those are our primary interface points, and we really kind of work in the standard air cargo market and model today, which is name us a place, we'll give you a price of how much it costs to deliver there.
When did you start this company?
I started in April of 2016. I started working by myself, and then a few months later, I brought in my co-founder, Joe, who is an aerospace engineer and really the engineering expertise and backbone of the company.
Was it your first company?
No, I had a few previous ventures in consumer products. I had consulted as an engineer, and I had actually had a brief foray into owning a party bus. So a little all over the map.
How would you describe the startup phase of the company?
That's an interesting, that question is its own interview right there. The space is interesting. Within the whole drone delivery space, I think there's still a lot of hype and still a lot of vision over what you can do. I think technologists always have their eyes to the stars a little bit more, which is, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? And I think a lot of times the business realities come crashing back down over what is economically possible, not what is technically possible. I think we thought the adoption would be a little bit smoother on the aviation side because we offer them a tool that makes them more money, reduces risk in their operations. But we found sometimes the opposite to be true. Some of these players want to become gatekeepers instead as we're threatening their operation or just threatening with change. And change can always be difficult.
How about dealing with the FAA? Were they slow to embrace or easy to work with?
The FAA have been great to us and very easy to work with. We have a great operational relationship with them such that We can show up right now, our precedents, we can show up with just about any airport in the U.S. and set up operations with not so much of a word or a real need to interact with them on a local level. So as of our speaking now, we've been in 3 different states, including Puerto Rico, and never once have we had any trouble with FAA, local FSDOs, or airports. It's been great.
What advice would you offer to other drone operators to help them build a successful working relationship with the FAA?
That is interesting. I would say the biggest thing is always becoming friends and good patrons and having a good working relationship with your local contacts, be it the FSDOs, be it the airport authorities. Make yourself known and build up those working relationships, because a lot of things are solved on the interpersonal level rather than broad brush and strokes and large regulation. So just being a good citizen of the skies will get you much further than any rule change will.
For those who are interested in starting a drone-based business, what advice would you offer?
I will say the biggest piece of advice I can give in this, whenever you start a business, there's always that unlimited pool of optimism of what you could do and how amazing things would be. I would also say be your own devil's advocate and look at all the negatives. Do your own research and really find out what the challenge will be in that market space before you spend a dollar, which is what led me to spending a year working on paperwork and the FAA rule set before we built a single drone.
Now you're going to Drone Focus 2018 in North Dakota this year. What drew you, a California-based company, to Fargo?
That's a good question. I always like to come to drone events when possible. I'm very honored I was given the chance to give a keynote presentation on the unit economics of drone delivery, as well as lead a working group on drones and drone integration for disaster and humanitarian work. So that's really what led me out there, just a need and the ability to give back to the community and kind of share my lessons learned operating in the space.
Can you give us a little preview on what you'll be sharing?
I think I will save some of the big gotchas for the presentation. I will say this, if you expect me to be a friend of drone delivery, even though I work in the drone delivery space, you're in for a surprise.
When you were working on the smart bombs, was there a moment or a point in time where you just felt like you had to do something completely different?
You know what? There is one particular conversation that does stick in mind, which was 2 program managers were kind of bragging about how accurate some of these smart bombs and cruise missiles were in terms of, doing target operations where they're flying in through windows. And I always just thought, wait a second, you're telling me I can launch something from an F-16 at Mach 1.6 and have it land within inches, but I can't deliver a package for FedEx in a 737? I think that was really kind of the questioning moment in my mind of what else could we be doing with this and why aren't we?
Is there anything that we missed that we should talk about?
I think the thing I'd like to point out is that the integration into existing airplanes and aviation is much more nuanced and difficult than actually making a UAV glider. That is kind of the easy part. So I would say about 80% of our focus is how we actually integrate them onto existing commercial airplanes.
So what do you mean, getting the drone on the plane?
It's not so much the physically getting them on there. I can walk them on myself. It is getting a person with a $12 million CASA, CN-235 to agree to put a drone on his airplane and then throw it out the back door.
Oh, I see. There's probably not too many of those planes around.
Exactly. So that, I think, is the biggest struggle, is always that integration on an enterprise level, a business-to-business level, and really the burden of proof that those organizations need to feel safe integrating drone operations. And so while my lessons are specific to aerospace and to air cargo operators, I see lots of parallels with people trying to get into drone inspection, say for utilities or pipelines and power utilities. It's not so much the technology, it's really that business-to-business relationship of how you get them to feel okay integrating drone inspection into their operations.
Okay, so going off of what you just said, just to make sure I understand it correctly, your business is basically in the payload, and someone else owns the planes and manages that part of the operation.
Correct. Planes are pretty geographically specific, and more importantly, I don't know the flying rules of every area in the world that we operate in. So a lot of our business is buying in and renting space on commercial cargo airplanes.
How difficult was it in Puerto Rico to get the planes that you needed?
We were very fortunate in that it was very easy. The need and magnitude was much, much larger than the capacity. So we were able to work backwards and rent an airplane first and then say, by the way, take the door off. We're going to be throwing things out the back of it. And since all the operators, the owners, they were all local to the island and they knew the devastation, it was a pretty easy sell for them. they really turned to us and said, if you can get the FAA on board, we will do this in a heartbeat.
How are you typically approached for an engagement? Say like in Puerto Rico. Is it something that you notice the devastation on TV and then you make the inquiries? Or does someone on the ground say, hey, we need some drone deliveries, and they call you?
There is a very small and very well-networked community of people in disaster and emergency services and kind of emergency aviation. So we network through them. A lot of those operators who kind of have their own segment or specialty, and then we work with them to identify the need. So it's usually going through the aviation partners and through ground groups like the World Food Program, Global Vaccine Alliance, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. These are the people who have an extreme logistics need but don't have a solution. So we usually approach the problem that way.
What's the future hold for Dash Systems? Any major milestones planned for this year?
We do. Unfortunately, some of them are under wraps, but we are quoting work on 3 continents right now, so expect to see a lot more things falling through the sky.
Any other comments?
Well, a week ago, we were able to show up at a customer's location, and 1 hour later, we were all mounted on their plane and doing airdrops and landing within 10 meters that day, all within 1 hour of showing up in a location.
And for my last question, Joel, how do you hope Dash Systems will impact the lives of people in the future?
We have this great opportunity to use drone technology for good and kind of undo a lot of that bad precedence of making smart bombs or having that being the sole focus on the military the last 2 or 3 decades. So one day in the future, I would like to say that I helped on every continent by providing delivery services at a fair price that all came within 12 hours.
That's it for episode 159 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Joel Ifill of Dash Systems and learning about the company's revolutionary precision drone delivery service. I want to thank Joel for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Dash Systems or want to connect with Joel, check out the webpage at dashshipping.com. And if you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1 per month, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. To donate, go to patreon.com/Drone Radio Show. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Goers.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.